You're about to listen to the Savvy Radio Show. Learn from real-life real estate investors, experience revealed with the Savvy Landlord as your host.
Yes, Savvy investors, here we are again in the studio. And it didn't take too long to bring back a veteran, Pat Poynton. If you have not heard of him, he is an Oklahoma City legend on the radio and private money connoisseur raiser, whatever you want to call him. But he's raised about $6 million in private money. He's a guy you want to get to know. He's been on 4 other episodes already, episodes 4, 5, 7, and 9. He's taught several classes. He's sought out as a mentor and a coach. I consider him one of my mentors as well if I have a unique situation or just anything. And I love, he calls me and asks me what plumber to use. I call him and it's awesome. I needed an electrician, and the electrician actually called me and said, Pat said you needed an electrician. So I do admire you not only as a successful investor, but as a friend. And so back on the show, back in the studio. So how are you, Pat?
I'm good, and I'm glad to be here. I guess we're going to talk a little today about another form of raising private money, which is creative finance, a way to make a deal with something other than your cash.
So let's go through a basic thing of your mind. You're driving through Midwest City. That's kind of where you like to roll. And you see a for sale by owner sign.
Okay. Well, that's always a good start.
Okay.
And, if I determine that the property has merit, now we're going to figure out how we're going to buy this.
Right. What goes through your mind? Do you try to go through bank financing first?
No, that's last.
Okay.
The first thing I look at is what's the seller's motivation? If the seller's not heavily motivated to sell the property, then it probably isn't a deal I'm going to do. But if the seller is pretty motivated to sell the property, then it opens up a variety of avenues where maybe the seller carries some or all of the balance other than the down payment for some period of time. Now, sometimes it'll be a situation where maybe I give them $3,000 or $5,000 or $10,000 or some number down, and I get them to carry a mortgage balance of whatever, $30,000 or whatever for 15 years at 7% or whatever I can negotiate. Now, obviously, the more motivated they are, the more likely they are to accept something like that.
Yeah. So how do you open up the conversation? Especially FSBOs are my golden ticket as well, because do you do research on the property first, see if it's debt free, or do you call them, or do you just throw it at, how do you handle the? Well,
normally the first thing I do is if I'm driving through and I see a property, I call my wife or whoever's in the office and I say, look this up, give me an idea what the tax assessor says, how long have they owned it, that sort of thing. And I usually get a quick thumbnail sketch of how many square feet, what the tax assessor says, and some information like that. When I look at the property, I'm looking not only at its condition, but I'm asking questions of the people that are showing it to me about why they're selling it, how they acquired it, how long have they owned it, what kind of information can I gather. I mean, have you been renting it? Have you had problems with the tenants? Are you moving? Are you getting a divorce? I mean, if you listen and you ask open-ended questions, many times the owners will tell you what their motivation is. For instance, one time I said, well, why are you trying to sell the property? And she said, well, my husband and I we're living here and we're getting a divorce and I can't afford the payments any longer. And so he's moved away and so I'm going to have to sell the property. And I said, well, I'm sure sorry to hear about that, but unfortunately those things happen. How long have you been trying to sell it? Well, I've been trying to sell it for 3-4 months. That tells me she might very well be behind with the payments. She's probably highly motivated. She said she couldn't afford them, and she hadn't been able to sell it for several months. So the information she's giving me back gives me some idea how I might approach creative finance.
Do you? How fast do you open up the conversation with owner finance or subject to, and if you don't know what a subject to is out there, folks, we're going to talk a lot about a subject to. That what that means is that you're taking over the existing mortgage. There's a mortgage in place, and you're deeding it into a trust, and you become the minister of the trust, and you make the payments. The current deed holder or the person that's on the loan no longer is involved anymore, and you basically take over it.
Well, now that's certainly something I'm thinking about when I hear the scenario that I just laid out, where they're divorcing and one of them is struggling to make the payments. Maybe if it's got a good enough mortgage, I do that. And let me give you an example of two I looked at just in the last few months. One of them had like a 6% loan, and I was eager to try to buy that subject to. The other one had some sort of an adjustable rate loan that could go up to 12 or 13%. Right. Now, it was cheap now, but in the long run, it was not going to be cheap.
Now, what do you mean that you looked at two deals that were already pre-existing subject twos?
Yeah. They were not subject twos. They were houses I thought I might make subject twos.
Okay.
And as I was inquiring about the mortgage that was on the property,
right,
just making conversation. Well, I know you're struggling. What kind of interest rate do you have? Well, I have a 6%. Is it a fixed? Oh, yeah, it's fixed. Is it it's a 30-year note. Well, now I'm very interested in this. You see what I'm saying?
It's free money.
Now, on the other hand, the other person I talked to, they said, well, we've got some one of them, I think it's fixed for 3 years or 2 years, then it goes up, it becomes an adjustable rate, and it's going up like next month. And I can figure easily when I talk to her that it's probably going to go up to 7 or 8, 9%. And it's subject to going up to 12 or 13% when I find out more about it. Automatically, I'm no longer interested in exploring subject to on this house.
Because of the adjustable rate?
I don't want that loan.
Well, I mean, isn't there an exit strategy in there where you can, say, pull the equity out, like maybe refinance it or sell it to someone else?
Certainly, those would be considerations. Now we're back to looking at the house and trying to figure out how we're going to buy it without the subject to. Or if we used a subject to, we would only use it for 3 to 6 months while we got rid of the property.
All right, so let's go over this again. So you try to find every deal subject to. I've heard you.
Absolutely.
One of my men. So
Absolutely.
I've heard that from a mentor of mine that used to mentor under you. They're like, I try to buy every house subject to, even the house that you lived in at one time.
I prefer to live in a subject to house.
Because you have no money down, usually, or very little.
And I have no liability.
And you own it.
Yeah.
Or the control of it.
Right. Well, I own it. I mean, we work on the theory that if it walks like a duck and it sounds like a duck, that it's probably a duck.
Okay.
Now, that sounds funny, but here's the thing. When I've got the trust, and I'm the trustee of the trust, it's deeded into the trust, and then I have a transfer of ownership in the form of a beneficial interest. In other words, I have a document that says you were the owner of the property and you have 100% of the beneficial interest. I am now the trustee, and you can then give me your beneficial interest. Now I am not only the trustee, but I am the beneficiary of the trust. I own the property. If it looks like a duck, it is a duck.
Well,
this looks like a duck, and it is a duck, even though I don't own it the way most people think of it.
Sure. I mean, this all sounds sexy and great. So let's talk about the pitfalls of subject twos, because I know there's a lot of bad people out there that say a good game. They'll take a house on subject to. The poor little lady can't make the payments. They make the payments, and then they go out and subject to it. Or, I mean, they're not subject to it. They go out and do a wraparound mortgage, or they do a sandwich lease option. They take $5,000 down, and they go down the road, and then that second investor gets divorced, and he crumbles on the deal.
Oh, certainly you can have those things happen.
Now that's on our side, but we're both integrity men. We're gonna pay if we're gonna honor it. I know a guy that did a subject to, and he had a lot of problems with insurance. There was a claim that happened.
Okay. Well, now I don't know what documents he had. Among mine, one of my documents clearly states that the trustee has the full and final authority to act in matters of insurance, in matters of taxes, in matters of litigation that might concern the property, such as boundary disputes, or my tree falls on their yard, or their tree falls on mine, or whatever. And so I have never had a single bit of insurance problem. I've had many insurance claims.
Right. And then you write that claim in those individuals' name, or you request that claim in their name. I can
deposit it. It says I can deposit it as the trustee into my own account and administer the money.
Now, what about? I'm going to put you to the test today, Pat. This ain't going to be easy. You think you're just going to slide into the Savvy Radio Show?
Bring it right on, buddy. Okay. Bring it right on.
All right. So, okay, we got a claim on a property. and you get the check. Okay, you're savvy. You talk to the insurance company. They're like, "Yep, we see the claim." You work the adjuster. You get a full roof replacement. Boom. They write a check to Sally person that has the insurance.
No, I stop right there. That's what they don't do. You contact them. You send them
the new docs.
No, you send them just the document that says you're the trustee, which is the deed into the trust, and the document that says that as the trustee you have the full and final responsibility to administer the trust with regard to any claims, insurance, legal, whatever. And then you have the check made out to
now if you
XYZ Mortgage Company and you.
Right. Now, that was my next question. All right, so now it's the trustee. So let's say in this case, Pat and 321 Trust. Okay. Now it's in the trust. The check says 321 Trust, and it says the mortgage holder.
Right.
Now it's Wells Fargo. You call Wells Fargo. You're like, "Hey, I got this check. What do I do? How do I pay for this new roof?" Okay. Now they might want to see trustee documents.
They may. I would send them as few documents as I can give them. But if they have to, they can see the trust. But here's what I would tell them. I would say, "Now look, we need to get a roof on this. You need to now normally what I do is I'll put the roof on it myself as a rule because I got to protect the property that I'm entitled to."
And you're a GC.
Yeah, and I'll put the roof on myself. And then I will say, "Here's the paid for lien releases showing that the material was put on the roof and the labor was paid and a lien release was done. Now, I need you to endorse this check." Now, generally what I've done, and I've done it with Wells Fargo, is I've gone to their local office and had this conversation with one of their representatives, and they'll call the home office and we'll talk back and forth and they'll sign the check. And I'll leave with the check. My wife has handled it many times.
Now, you said something that was really awesome. The lien release. When you start saying the word lien to a bank, they start moving around.
Well, see,
they start jumping, and that's a rookie real estate investors out there. Here is a tip for you today. When you get a roof done, get a release of lien. What do you mean? Well, you pay for the $5,000, $10,000 roof, and you have a receipt for it, but that roofer still can file a lien on the property.
Unless he signs a release.
Unless he gives you a release. So if you're a real estate investor and this is your first property that you're getting a roof on, get a lien release. And if the rookie roofer doesn't know what that is, get a piece of paper drawn up and have the guy sign it, because this document, this one page, says that he can never come back and put a lien on that property resulting of this new roof. And you have this document now that you can use as leverage over the bank. Hey, there's going to be a lien put on this property unless you sign over this insurance check, which is due me anyway because your insurance adjuster said it's right, and we need to put a roof on it.
Well, basically, I've never really had much issue with it. Now, the people that have done it wrong probably have issues, but we've done it right, and we've never had an issue.
Okay, so how about this issue? And this is a side note. What if are you nervous about paying for the roof on the front end and not getting the check from the insurance company, or you have ammunition from there?
Well, you have a lot of different ammunition.
Okay.
One ammunition is you said, well, now look, if you're not going to pay me, then maybe maybe we just have to part ways. And I've got the house rented, and so maybe I just won't make the mortgage payments till I recoup the money I've spent on the roof.
Mm. Okay, and you obviously haven't gotten that far.
Maybe you can say anything and do anything. I tell you the deal I did one time. I had a guy. I bought a house, and I knew it had a pretty contentious lender. Okay, because I knew who the lender was.
Was it private money?
No, but it was a pretty contentious.
Hard money?
Yeah, it was a hard money deal.
Okay, well, get to the come on.
Well, anyway, the point was, when I contacted them, they said, "Well, we're not going to let you make payments. We're going to foreclose."
Because it says in their mortgage.
Yeah. I said, well, that's fine. What I did, because I thought we were going to fight about it, is I rented the house for a little below market on a month-to-month rental agreement. I said, well, if that's your feeling on the subject, then I won't make any payments.
Okay.
It'll take you 6 to 9 months.
Foreclose on you.
To foreclose. I'm getting $1,000 a month from this tenant, and I will give her her deposit back and wish her well and write her a great recommendation letter whenever it's
Time to
after
leave.
the sheriff's sale. And in the meantime, she's rented it below market, and I pocketed all the money. Now, if you'd like me not to do that, then let's work together. If you don't, I'll make $6,000 to $10,000 on this property, and I'll be happy to go.
Got it. All right, that's a good technique. All right, now what about bankruptcy? You do a subject to, you acquire the property over, and they go bankrupt.
Doesn't matter because it's deeded into the trust, and you're the trustee. That bankruptcy doesn't have anything to do
Only
with
if
it.
you keep continuing to make the payments.
Yes. Now, if you fail to make the payments, it's going to get foreclosed, whether they were bankrupt or they were ace high. If they're not making the payments and you're not making the payments, it's going to get foreclosed.
So no matter what, as soon as you get the property in the subject to and you deed it into a trust, you're in control. You make the payments, and you're having a great life.
Yeah. Now, if for any reason they don't want to accept your payments and they send them back,
Have you had that happen?
never have. I've had them threaten to do it. This guy was threatening me. It was another contentious BC lender back when they were a little more in the market than they are today.
Okay.
And he said, we just won't do that. And I said, well, I'm taking care of the property. I'm keeping the taxes paid. I'm keeping the insurance paid. But I said, I can't, if you're not going to work with me, then I can't guarantee you what condition you'll get it back in. He said, what do you mean? I said, I don't know if it'll have carpet in it. I don't know if it'll have appliances. I don't know if it'll have air conditioners and furnaces or hot water tanks. I don't know. He said, are you threatening to steal that stuff? And I said, wait right there. I got a deed to this property. So if I want to take the furnace out of it, it's my furnace.
That's right.
I'll take it if I want to. Now, I said, I'd sure hate for something like that to happen to your property. But if you want to push me, I'm going to push back.
Well,
you know what? I kept that property for like 8 years.
Afterward, well, I mean,
Never
of course
had
they're going
another
to cash the
cross
check.
word.
I mean, the point of the bank, you got to keep in mind, they just want to make money. They just want to make their interest and make sure they don't default on the loan. Regardless, it doesn't matter if it's a private lender, small lender, hard money.
They don't like it.
That's the point. You're loaning money to get paid back.
Right. They don't like it, but they like it better than a foreclosure in many cases.
All right. So that was some 2 taboo things that I've heard of subject to. So let's get back to the lady that you called on the house, got the details. So how do you smooth your way into saying, well, first of all, me personally, I try to find out if the house is debt free. I mean, because usually when it has no lien or any kind of money owed on a property, they tend to be more flexible on owner finance.
That's ideal. That's absolutely ideal because now they need, they'd like to have all their money, but they don't have to have it. Now, if you got a lender breathing down your neck and you're trying to sell the property for cash, you're going to have to give the lender their money.
Sure.
So you're highly motivated to do that. Or if it's free and clear, you're not. Now, I don't find that many free and clear properties that I want to buy subject to. Or no, they wouldn't be subject to then. They'd actually be a note and mortgage owner finance. I often find a property that has some equity. Let's say it's a $100,000 home and they owe $75,000 and they got a good note. Okay, maybe I'd say, look, I'll get a new loan for $75,000, and would you carry $20,000 back as a second?
So you're buying it for $95,000
or $100,000?
Oh, what is it worth though? $100,000?
Maybe it's worth $125,000 or $130,000. I'm not talking about what it's worth. I'm talking about what I'm buying it for.
Okay, got it.
Okay, so maybe I've given them $5,000 and they carry back $20,000,
Sure.
and that's a second mortgage.
And they're out of the first mortgage.
And they're out, and I pay off the first mortgage with my new first mortgage. So I'm in it with a first mortgage from a bank or a private investor or wherever I get it,
The $20,000.
and I've got the $20,000 they're carrying, as opposed to having to find.
And you acquired the property for only $5,000.
Yeah.
And you created 2 payments. Now you got the first mortgage of the $75,000. That payment is $600. Whatever that payment is. And now you have a second mortgage for that $20,000 that you owe, and the $5,000 that you originally put down.
Right.
Yeah, it's definitely a comfortable deal if the seller is able to do that.
But many times they are able to do that more than you
Because
think.
there's spread. It would be a $125,000 house. You're buying it for. You're
Did I say
financing.
100?
Yeah, but you're financing it for
100.
$7. I mean, we're technically financing at $75,000 of the first.
Right.
And it wouldn't be difficult to get that $75,000. Would you get a traditional anywhere?
You could get that loan from a bank. You could get that loan from a private investor. You could get that loan from a mortgage company. I mean, you get that like you get any other loan.
All right. So your favorite loan or the way to acquire properties through subject to?
That's certainly one of them.
Okay. What's another one?
Ideally, 100% seller finance is the perfect way.
Sure.
Unfortunately, I don't get that many of those.
Unfortunately.
I mean, if I could get them, I'd do nothing else. and
Unfortunately, you don't get them.
And then the third kind would be where I use private money rather than a bank. And the fourth way would be to use bank money. And now I may have 4 different prices. If you'll carry it, I'll give you this. If you'll carry part of it, I might give you that. And if I can buy it subject to, I'll give you this. And if I got to pay all cash, I'll give you this.
Yeah.
And they
used to be called, a technical term or whatever, called a dual offer.
A multiple offer.
So this just happened to me the other day. I was cleaning out my desk. It's random. I got a piece of paper. I saw that house was for sale. I went and called them, and they were motivated. They bought a house out 2 hours away, and they still had this other property.
That's a good one.
They bought it. It's worth about 65, but they think it's only worth 50. But then the comps have gone up, and they owe $38,000 with Wells Fargo, 6.5 on the first loan, and for some dumb reason, they have a second mortgage on a brand new heat and air system.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So this was all new to me. This is my first subject to deal that I just locked this down the other day, and so let's run the numbers. It's worth 65. They owe 38 on it. They owe a 5,000 second. So we're at 43,000. It's
on a $65,000 house. Right. Okay.
And they know that it needs about $3,000 worth of repair. That it needs new tile in the bathroom.
So you're going to be in it for 51 or such a matter.
Right. And I can definitely rent it out for 800. So it's in my wheelhouse. It's not something that I'm a big fan of, 2 bedrooms. So I called them and met with the guy. He was really motivated. And of course, it takes him 3 hours to come meet me. He's like 200 miles away. And so I talked to him. I was like, listen, I can't buy it for what you owe on it, for $45,000, $44,000, some change with closing costs. But what I can do, so here's the option. I was like, I'll give you $38,000 cash if you come to closing with 6 to pay off that second mortgage and all the closing costs. Well, the interesting thing that went down, so he thought about it. So then I went on vacation. I came back and I met with him and I brought the contract. But this is a subject to contract. It said, I'm taking over the 2 loans. We're going to deed into the trust. And I learned from Thomas Morgan, be full disclosure. This is what I'm doing. This is how I'm doing it. And, they were like, well, when is this ever going to get out of my name? I said, well, it could depend. It could be a year. It could be 2 years. They didn't really like that so much. And most people don't. And this is my first deal of negotiating. So I was like, man, I don't know what to say. I go, here's your options. At the end of the day, you can show up to closing with $6,000 cash, or you can show up with nothing and pay nothing and walk away, and I'll take care of this headache. Well, they were up in arms, nothing negative. They were like, the husband and wife were back and forth. Well, eventually they signed my subject to contract. Right. And I was like, fabulous. So this is my first subject to So then I went out and flipped the contract. I went out and I called several investors. I said, this is an $800 a month rental. It's worth $65,000, maybe $60 on a bad day. You got to put $3,000 in it. I go rents for $800. I got one on the hook already. And, 2 days later, this is right after Thanksgiving, the seller calls me and says, hey, we're just going to bring the $6,000 at closing. So perfect. So they're going to bring I got to bring $38,000, which I'm going to sign the contract to my wholesaler, to my real estate investor for $44,000. Yeah, it sounds like $6,000 of profit, but there's, there could be something pop up on the lien or whatever. But that's creative financing. I just created some money out of thin air.
Anytime you buy a subject to or whatever, you created money out of thin air. I mean, you really have.
Yeah, tell me the positives to it.
Well, the first positive is you bring little or no money to the deal.
In this case, I brought my time, maybe 2-3 hours of time, some photos.
Now let me tell you the kind of house that I buy subject to on a majority of the time.
Okay.
It's in some place like Yukon, a very good neighborhood. It's what I call a beautiful house. Now, generally, it has a pretty small equity, because if it hadn't, then a realtor would probably have sold it. But let's say it's a $100,000 house, and it's in a neighborhood that's only selling for $110,000. You can hardly get a realtor to sell it and pay the closing costs and get their 6%. The deal don't really work.
I have one of those right now
in
Mustang. It's $115,000. I'm getting hammered.
But here's the deal. It needs no work. It'll rent for its payment.
Okay.
Maybe a little more.
Break even.
Yeah, or maybe ideally $150 above its payment.
So let's $1,000 a month. You rent it out for $1,150.
That'd be ideal.
But and the PITI is all in on that payment. Okay.
Right. Okay. Now here's the thing. I got no money in it.
Mm-hmm.
It's in a good neighborhood, a neighborhood that should appreciate and should stay rented.
What's the equity on the time of takeover?
5,000-6,000, maybe 10.
So there's really nothing in the deal.
Not very much. 5, 6, 7 years from now, there's $15,000 or $20,000 in the deal.
And you really didn't lose anything. You're making $150 a month.
That's right. And I put nothing in it. That's a pretty house deal.
Well, how do you handle objections when they're like, "What do you mean I'm still on the loan?" What do you say on that?
I say, well, it's not ideal. I know what would be ideal. I mean,
For me to bring cash.
Stephen, the ideal would be for me to bring you $110,000 in $100 bills. That'd be ideal.
Yeah.
I can't do it, and obviously you've been trying to sell it, and nobody else seems to be able to do it either.
And all the fancy realtors.
And the realtors can't seem to fix it for you, or they would have already fixed it. Now, what it is a rather ugly solution to an ugly problem. Now, I know that it's no problem if I pay and everything goes according to plan. It's only a problem if I don't.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what I have here is 4 or 5 people's names who I've done these for in the past, who have given me permission to let people like you contact them, and they'll share their experience with you.
Okay.
Now, I understand your reluctance. I also understand that if you have a foreclosure, it'll be 10 years before you can get it off your credit. I don't care what the banks tell you. They tell you anything to get you to give them the keys, but the truth is it's going to be I-9 on your credit report for 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to hound you a whole lot more than you think it is. Now, I know it's an ugly solution because the beautiful solution is not here, but it's better than a default if it all goes right. Now, the question is if you believe me or you believe the next guy down the street. If he pays, it's all good. If I pay, it's all good. If he don't pay, it ain't so good.
Mm-hmm.
So I can't solve all your problems. I can tell you how I can fix it.
Okay.
Now, one thing I often end these conversations with, many times the first time I tell them this, they go, "No, I'm not going to do that." And I say, "I fully understand. I wish you only the best. Here's my card. Consider me to be your fallback position if it just doesn't turn out and you run out of time and you run out of options. Just pick the phone up and call me, and I'll do what I said I'd do, and it's a whole lot better than letting it go back to the bank."
Right.
I can't tell you the times people have called me back 3 months later and said, "I'm ready to do your deal."
You know, speaking of that, on my deal, it was weird. The guy was so motivated to give me his property that he whipped out the 2 statements, the first statement on the original mortgage and the second for the AC. And it was like just uncomfortable in my world because most of my stuff is just buying, cash and beating them up kind of.
I want to always see their mortgage. I want to read their mortgage.
Yeah, I mean, not their mortgage. I meant their mortgage statement, like their month, and they're all caught up too. That's another thing about this subject to deal. But I think it was just a good timing. They wanted to get out. It's end of the year.
Yeah, sometimes I've taken them when they were a couple months behind. Most times I won't.
Okay, I've heard people pay people to take over homes because they just don't want to deal with it.
Oh, I've had them give me all kinds of stuff. Now, let me tell you, when they call you back, you're in the driver's seat.
Oh, now you can ask for a payment up front?
I've walked in and I've said, it's a great deal. I'll do it, but there's been a few changes. Would you throw in that grandfather clock? Would you throw in that sectional? Would you throw in the lawnmower and the weed eater and the hoses and the barbecue grill?
Or a motorcycle?
My wife, I had a bass boat one time. But my wife told me one time, she said, "I'm going down to Mathis Brothers and buy me 2 leather sofas." She said, "We've been married 25 years, and all that time you have taken furniture out of other people's homes and put it in my home, and I'm going to go buy what I want for my living room, and I don't care whether you like it or you don't."
I need to meet Mrs. Point. All right, let's get back to the deal. One of the things, how long have you had what's the longest subject to have you had so far? Or you still have one currently, and how long is that?
Let's see. I have one that's on the market to sell now that I've had for probably 10 years.
And you're just done with it? Tired, high of the market?
Yeah, I'm basically getting to the point where I'm getting rid of most of my rental property.
Hey, I'm buying.
And but you don't want to buy it at my prices. You're buying it wholesale. I'm selling it retail.
Yeah, I buy wholesale. But we're going to give out your phone number here in a minute. Okay, so 10 years, that's a long time. And
I've had lots of 5
Have they ever,
years.
during that 10-year program, 10-year length of time, have they ever said, "Hey, when is it going to get on my name?"
I've had people do that a time or two.
And what do you say?
And I tell them, well, the market dictates that, not me.
Do they think that you're going to try to sell it this whole time, or do they know that you were going to rent it and make a spread?
I tell them, look, if the market gets where I can sell it and make what I need to make on it, I'm going to sell it.
What's that number? Is there a special number?
I like to make $10,000-$15,000
Okay, for your time.
for my time. 15 after expenses.
And those monthly.
Oh, and I'm not counting the monthly. That's the cost of doing business.
Okay. All right. So this is all great. Sounds good. Now, how do you get these deals? How do you market them? Do you direct mail? Do you do phone?
You can
tell
do
me,
any
Tell me
of
how
those.
you get them.
Well, I get most of mine from real estate agents. I have a couple of big writing agents that sell all my property. They get constant stream of people who don't have enough equity. They're in some really nice new development, don't have enough equity. They've gotten job transfers. They got too much house for their amount of money they've got. They've gotten a divorce. Those are probably three most common reasons. Anyway, for whatever reason, they need out. And they don't have enough equity to really make a viable deal. Now, I buy those because I know houses will go up in value over time. And if they've got a good enough loan on them that I can rent them for their payment or a little more, and they need no work, I figure I've got nothing to lose.
All right. How do you? Okay, we're going to wrap up with this one. We got 30 minutes already there, Pat. We're gonna bring you back on the show, of course. How do you compensate that realtor? I've had a realtor call me.
I don't compensate them as a rule, and if I do it with football tickets or.
So when they're calling, but most realtors have their hand out. I know realtors, you hate me, but that's okay. They come out wanting something, commission or.
Well, there's no money in this deal.
So they're genuinely trying to help this seller.
Right, and help you because you're a valued customer.
To them, because you've sold property through them before.
Yeah, and I always tell them, look, if you bring me these kind of deals, when I get ready to sell them, I'll list them with you.
Okay. Well, fair. Well said.
I don't know that, that I make it work 100% of the time, but I don't normally pay them. Now, I've got realtors that I value, and I often buy them dinner once a month or something. And I would, whether they send me any deals or not, because I value them for something.
Sure.
Like I've got one lady that I almost list almost all my houses with her because she's a tremendous agent.
And she does her job.
And that's why I do it. And when I buy her lunch because I appreciate the great job she's done on selling XYZ property. And if she sends me somebody, great. If she doesn't, I still love her and I'm going to use her.
All right, Pat. Let's end with this. What advice would you give someone? You got one of your students. They're just starting out. They got no money. And they need to do a subject to because they can't even. What advice would you give them? What's the one advice?
Well, it's going to be hard to do one without some sort of mentor or help because the paperwork alone is going to be fairly hard for you to figure out and come by without some kind of expert help.
All right. So are you still mentoring people?
Sure.
All right. Can we give out your number on the phone?
Sure.
Okay. And you take calls around the country. So if you're out there and you got your first subject to, I'm telling you right now, I called Dutch Revenvoort like 10 times on this last deal, and I called Thomas Morgan. I blew him up. I owe him dinner. I at least called him 10 times. I had one thing that was really interesting, and I'll say in this, and then we'll get your number. I'm pulling their contract together. All right, I've done hundreds of contracts, but I'm nervous about this contract. Right, and they both sent me separate contracts. They're similar, but they were different. So I had to weed through which one was a better contract. Didn't know. Got the contract, but then I'm looking the county for the legal, and the girl's name is wrong. And I'm like, who do I put? So I'm making 10 more calls trying to get a hold of these guys. Hey, who do I put the contract name in? The mortgage from Wells Fargo says Sally Lady, but the title on the county assessor says Sally Hunter. Who do you put it in? Well, of course, it's a legal situation. You put it in their legal name. Pretty common sense question, but you get emotional. And if you didn't have a mentor, someone I can just quickly call and say, hey, what do you do? He's like, look, dummy, you know that. And I was like, you're right. Anyway, if you need some help at all and you want to grow your business or you want to dip into subject twos or creative financing or private money, I just want to let you know for 2016, that is my goal to do some private money. I got 3 people already lined up willing to loan me money for private money.
There you go.
So I'm just getting all that lined out, getting the deals lined out. But give Pat Poynton a call. What's your phone number?
405 area code 479-0064. That'll ring directly to me. 479-0064.
479-0064. Area code 405. All right. Well, that's the Savvy Radio Show for today. We're going to bring Pat right back on, and we're going to cover more things that you need to know. Thanks for listening to the Savvy Radio Show. If you got anything going on, keep it going. But whatever you do, buy assets. Go to thesavvyradioshow.com. Have a great day.
Thanks for listening to The Savvy Radio Show. Glide online and listen to our other motivating episodes at SavvyRadioShow.com. Connect on Twitter at LandlordBook and always be buying assets.